Welcome to the Hawkeye Sidekick podcast. And you're very welcome back to the Hawkeye Sidekick Rugby Union podcast with your host Mark Kennedy, joined again this week by Liam O'Brien. Liam, how are things?
Great, Mark. Sure, we're celebrating a very successful tour to South Africa from Munster anyway.
Absolutely. I suppose, ladies and gentlemen, what we will be discussing tonight, URC Round 18, the regular season's in the books. We now know our 8 playoff contenders. We'll primarily look at the Munster Rugby Sharks fixture and also Glasgow Warriors Connacht. We'll also have a look at the initial playoff preview for the URC and also looking at the Challenge Cup and Champions Cup semi-finals, which are set for this weekend. I suppose, Liam, let's start first with Munster Rugby travelling to Durban to face the Sharks. Didn't look good at half-time, 22-3 down, but a far improved, cohesive performance. Munster securing a draw and maybe perhaps could have had a bit more. What were your thoughts on the game?
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose it was do or die because the Bulls ran up an unexpected scoreline earlier on against Leinster, with in terms of points difference. So we were for the start of the game, there was pressure on. Yeah, look, I mean, again, it seems to be a thing where we've been quite strong in the second half, even of the games that we've got a bit of a hammering. We've come back strong in the second half, but this was again first half. Sharks were very effective. Their maul, Bongi, was very effective in terms of scoring tries and offloading. And they built up a good lead for themselves in that first half. Munster, I suppose, weren't accurate in their execution. And it was looking like a long day at the office. I mean, honestly, I thought it was in the second half there. Looking at the score, I think it wasn't 19-3, it was 22-3. And I thought it was over at that stage, even getting any sort of a try. But yeah, I mean, I felt we dominated the last probably about 35 minutes of that game completely, and in the end probably should have won it, either getting a try or a drop goal conversion at the very death. For me, it's this getting standout performances. Players really stood up in that second half, from whether it was O'Mahony or Klein or Nash, Healy again. But I suppose in the first half, basically, one recurrent thing was just we got destroyed in the scrums, just absolutely destroyed. It was a thing where there were just, even more so than last week, I think it's fair to say that the Sharks have a very powerful front row. We had Archer in particular, I suppose, was getting the right doing from Inche, and then Bongi as well is obviously always a ferocious scrummager. But look, we kept going, and in the second half, I think really the truth was there was hardly a scrum at all in the second half, really, which helped them enormously. And when there was, the three guys were off. Their famous front row were off. I think for me, like, I look at the key moments, and I'm just going to say Peter O'Mahony, and that sort of kerfuffle was the key to lighten up Munster's performance, I think.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think you summed up the opening half incredibly well, Liam. And to be fair to the Sharks, they had 2 notable injuries here, Liam, in the opening half. I mean, Kolisi looks an absolute massive doubt, doesn't he, for the Rugby World Cup now, given his knee injury, his early withdrawal. And then obviously you had Edwin Bosch, who I thought had played pretty well, getting replaced, injured, looked like a hip abductor issue. Take nothing away from Munster. I thought the Peter O'Mahony led by example. I think his mantra really was that they were never going to take a backward step against the Sharks. And I think we'd mentioned last week here, Liam, in terms of Munster facing up to the Sharks again. Graham Rowntree had pains to say that lessons had been learned. And to be perfectly fair, that third quarter for Munster was pretty stirring stuff. Fassie's deliberate knock on gets the yellow card, but I think Peter O'Mahony's involvement here, it was needed. It needed to create the energy levels to Munster to really invigorate them in that half. And I think, you can criticise all you want in video analysis, but in the game itself, it needed that energy to really invigorate the Munster team, because, as you say, I thought it was a much more cohesive second half compared to the opening period, where even Munster had spells of pressure in the Sharks 22. The cohesion, particularly from the backs, wasn't at the standard. But I thought overall, to a man, as you say, Munster really did step up the the pressure. And Calvin Nash has been, I think, one of the players of the season here for Munster, Liam. And that was a fantastic score, really, to kind of set up Munster for that grandstand finish here in the final quarter.
Absolutely, yeah, it was, and it's such a clever kick ahead from him as well. I don't know, he must be quite high on the try scoring charts in terms of the URC, I would reckon, this stage. And even in terms of Ireland selection, I mean, he's what? He has to be nearly third or fourth choice for Ireland in terms of his overall wing play, And a number of things happened, I think, in the beginning of the second half there, where the Sharks actually, I think Chamberlain, who was the replacement, he actually could have kicked right to the corner and instead actually kicked out in the full. And then Werner Koch conceded a penalty, and basically we had Healy kicks across there, then to Nash, and suddenly, I think that was a huge turning point in the game as well. And again, Healy coming on early in the second half as well, that was quite significant, I thought, as well. And yeah, so and again, I thought that Murray came into his own more in that second half as well. Extremely clever try. You could say it was easy, but you have to have the nerve to know when to jot it down. Yeah, like all the guys made an impact, even a Dogbo. Maybe initially he had a knock on, but he was absolutely a monster, in terms of his ruck and his defence. I think that, really we pushed on that final 10 minutes, and that was quite very satisfactory as well. The fact that we were absolutely playing all the rugby, they were out on their feet, and we could have got something else, but I guess, look, we already had our point at that stage. I think that it was nice to see Earls actually come on in the final 10 minutes. I think we kind of figured out that he literally had to go straight off again because he was tearing the jersey, and then we saw Jack O'Donoghue suddenly out in the wing. But so it was great to see Earls as well, I must say.
Hopefully that withdrawal is not too serious from a Keith Earls perspective. It's great to see him back on a rugby pitch. I suppose, Liam, from our perspective, again, the Ben Healy cameo, superb, but really might have encompassed the Sharks season in that 40 minutes. The kick game was diabolical. Let's be brutally frank about it. And once Munster asked the questions here, particularly when that Calvin Nash try went over, you just got a sense that there was blood in the water. And it wasn't Munster blood here. It was Sharks blood in the water. That the only team that was going to really win this was actually Munster Rugby. And to be fair to Munster, I thought Finning Wycherley was absolutely superb. He comes in for RG Schneiman. And I think there was maybe a few question marks in terms of, will we have the same impact from a front five perspective? But I thought Finning Wycherley took his opportunity incredibly well here, Liam.
Yeah, he did, because, I mean, that's the real question mark is about his physical presence. He certainly is a quality in his general play, but sometimes you kind of would worry at scrum time. But yeah, he was immense. And again, we talk about this, I suppose, tour, this brief tour. I mean, he's been immense in this tour, along the likes of Ken Dillon as well. And that's been very satisfying, how these guys have stood up. Klein, of course, as well, is probably the unsung hero as well. And I definitely think it helped in terms of our line out as well. Our line out was like top notch, and yeah, in most facets, we dominated in that second half.
You can throw Dermot Barron's name in there as well from a hooker perspective. Didn't think he put a foot wrong there as well. So I think there's an awful lot of pleasing aspects here, Liam. And I suppose the closing exchanges here, maybe there's question marks in terms of whether Gavin Coombs has actually gone over or not. Again, inconclusive from, let's say, Mike Adamson. The 50-22 that kind of set this up, again, maybe a few game smarts from Munster could have been just set it back to Healy to maybe get the drop a goal, but maybe the pitch conditions here in Durban, far from ideal, I think, for place kicking, so maybe that kind of negated that kind of option for Munster. But again, look at the stats here, Liam. Munster Rugby secured 5th in URC. I mean, their last 11 URC games, it reads as follows: 8 wins, 1 draw, 2 losses. Considering the start to the season that Munster had, I think it's an incredible achievement for the Munster Rugby management and squad here to achieve this status in the league. And again, assures playoff for the URC, but significantly Champions Cup rugby for next season.
Yeah, because at the start of the league, I think it was something like 2 from 6 games. I think it was like a 3, and then we wouldn't beat Zebra, and then so I mean, like, it was such a poor start, and the overall season we finished a point more than last season, and we finished a spot more higher than last season. So I mean, like, whatever way you look at it, just on that alone, we've absolutely improved. And you could argue even against Leinster, I mean, which is the benchmark, we were tighter in our games this season. We had a 1-point loss in one game, you know. So and funnily enough, we lost at home to Ulster by a point, and then we go to Ulster and we beat them. So, you know, we've actually won away to Ulster and the Stormers, you know, 2 really top teams. So again, that's very pleasing. Overall, our whole attack has been very impressive throughout. I suppose, there were day blips, those games against Glasgow and against the Sharks. Was there maybe, particularly against the Sharks, were the conditions a huge factor as well? Possibly, you'd have to say. But we have a very strong squad there now. The Glasgow game, as we've seen with Connacht against them, it certainly is a game that we can absolutely target. Steenman comes back in, but there's like no guarantee of his selection, because the selection across the board is going to be very intriguing.
I think it will be pretty intriguing, Liam, when we consider the arrival of Sean O'Brien. The Westmeath native arrives to Munster from Exeter Chiefs at the end of the season. So that'll be an interesting acquisition here, Liam. I suppose, get your thoughts on that from Munster rugby perspective. I mean, it was required given some of the losses of Chris Farrell, Malachi Fikatoa, Dan Goggins. So, I mean, a guy that's well respected in Exeter Chiefs and should be looking to make a real good impact for Munster next season. Yeah,
because again, I mean, you would say certainly Frisch is certainly there, but there's no guarantee that our other foreign signing is going to, you know, go on fire. You know, you hope so, but certainly Sean O'Brien basically has a chance to be probably arguing in Munster's starting 12 next season. I mean, that's the reality of it. Like, you know, if he kicks on from pre-season, you know, he could be in a partnership there and Munster starter. So that's a massive, I suppose, spur on for him. Now, this is a guy who's already featuring, who's already starting for Exeter in the European Cup. And hopefully again we'll see him at the weekend again, getting a start. So this is a very astute signing basically that we have. We already have a guy who's playing at the highest level in Europe, again, who can cover multiple positions as well.
Oh God, absolutely. Like, he can cover back three as well. Liam's fierce versatility with Sean O'Brien. I'm also thinking the likes of Liam Coombs and even Shane Daly here as well, to a certain extent, that could make a transition here to 3/4 next year. Given the departures that we've had, there doesn't seem to be any other incomings from, let's say, a back perspective. So I think it'll be an interesting pre-season here, Liam, just to see the 3/4. But I suppose we have to call it out, the front row. I mean, Jeremy Lockman and Stephen Archer, my God, the two guys in the last 2 games were absolutely heroic, I thought, in terms of the amount of game minutes. But does this expose a little bit in terms of depth chart, in terms of our loose head and tight head positions here, that management, I thought, did freshen it up this week or last week in Durban? But again, the same unit went out against the Sharks. I suppose, can I get your read on the front row depth chart here? I know John Ryan arrives back from Waikato Chiefs, you know, in the pre-season, but is there grounds for improvement here in terms of depth chart and maybe acquiring maybe 1 or 2 other players before the end of next season?
Yeah, the thing is, like, realistically, it is a bit bonkers to start 2 guys, you know, in two mass games in a row. But what were the options, you know? You get talk about going backwards as it was. I mean, it'd be dangerous if you had to, you know, quite frankly, put in Keenan Knox and Wycherley starting that game, you know. So there was no real choice, to be honest with you. There just was no choice there. But in terms of next season, look, I mean, the only thing you can say is you probably have 2 lads who are 35 years old, but they'll equally share game time. So that's probably what's going to happen for Munster next season. John Ryan will play half the season, and Archer will play half the season. And yeah, Lockman, without a doubt, the starting loose head. And again, I suppose, look, the real thing about Killer is, will he last? Will he last next season? Injury wise, huge kind of question marks over that, to be honest. Well, and again, I just don't think that the guys who are supposed to be second choice or third choice, I don't think at loose head and tight head, I just don't think they're up to it whatsoever. And well, we know that Roundtree doesn't read things the same in terms of the amount of game minutes that our starting front row have had to play in the 2 games as well.
Yeah, I think that speaks volumes from a coaching take perspective, particularly at the loose head and tight head prop positions. Key games in the season, I'd even go back to the Glasgow Warriors game here as well, Liam. From then on, it has been minimal changes in those 2 positions particularly. So I think it's food for thought for Munster Rugby, particularly going into the off-season and seeing how they're going to improve. Even the guys that were the fringe guys here, they really haven't stepped up. They really haven't put the hand out for selection. So I think that's a little bit of a worry for Munster going into pre-season. But take nothing away from Munster Rugby, securing 5th in URC, avoiding another trip down to South Africa as well here in the process, Liam. And as you say, they'll be travelling away to Scotstoun to face Glasgow Warriors, who entertain Connacht Rugby. So Connacht, knowing the ramification of results beforehand, started the game pretty well. Again, it was a very competitive game here, but I think Connacht Rugby did show, to a certain degree, some vulnerabilities in Glasgow Warriors, particularly pack, scrummaging, but also in open play as well. What were your readings of that game where Glasgow won 29-27?
I suppose we really enjoyed the rugby match itself. But yeah, I mean, look, Connacht were able to get a penalty try. We had Cian Prendergast driving over and obviously getting a try at the end as well. So I mean, certainly they've shown vulnerabilities in terms of the scrum and at Maul time as well. It's well capable of disrupting them. And I think too, like I said, I think we've been very impressive in our last 8 games away as well. So I mean, we've a huge advantage in the sense of we know how to win huge key away games, maybe more than any other team in the league, to be honest, about this stage. So that's also going to go in our favour. Yeah, we have come to a stage where we have such choice in virtually every position that I think we're going to cause Glasgow a lot of worry, and we have the motivation of such a poor performance at home against Glasgow as well. I think that's going to count.
I think so too. I think there's a revenge mission here in Scotstoun. There's no love lost between these 2 franchises. Let's be brutally honest about that. I think from a Connacht Rugby perspective as well, they did show an awful lot of good signs, particularly after recovering after 50 seconds when Hugh Jones went over. And I mean, the penalty try, the scrummaging unit for Connacht completely on top here. And really, is that going to get into the heads of an awful lot of match officials here going into the playoffs with Glasgow Warriors? Because I thought refereeing wise, some of the 50-50 calls really did go against Connacht Rugby, particularly at the end when they were kind of chasing the win here. I mean, Cian Prendergast as well. It was a lovely switch move, close range to score. Glasgow do give you opportunities to score here, Liam. I mean, they impress against Munster and Thomond Park, but still, Munster came on strong, particularly in that 3rd, 4th quarter of the game. So I think Munster will be going to Scotstoun in 2 weeks' time, pretty well buoyed by seeing the performance of Connacht Rugby here as well, but also coming in with the form that they have. I suppose that the ending of this game, Hurley Langton goes over for the try for Connacht, has been very impressive this season for Connacht, setting up the grand slam finish. Now, I think this is where the pragmatism probably came in from Connacht. They were awarded a penalty just inside the Glasgow Warriors half, going on 80 minutes. If they'd won here, they would have had to travel to the Stormers, I believe, was it? Yeah. So
that's right. Yeah.
So, I mean, they went for the line, but again, the match officials left an awful lot to be desired here. Cummins definitely coming in from an offside position. So I think from that perspective, Connacht can feel very aggrieved. But again, given the playoff fixtures here, travelling to Kingspan to face Ulster Rugby, maybe not the worst thing in the world here for Connacht Rugby, and a fixture that they can really relish and look forward to.
Yeah, and again, it's kind of the thing at the end where, like, do you really want to win? Yeah, it is one of those occasions. But in terms of the Kingspan, I actually give Connacht a great chance. If Connacht go there with all their big name lads, if Beelum and Aki, they must select everyone, okay? But if they do that, absolutely, they've a glorious chance, because Ulster, when it's come down to the last few years, they haven't really kicked on. They have some serious talent. Really, I'd have to say that Connacht really have, again, we talk about Munster being one of the teams of the season, Connacht, to finish in 7th, to be almost there in terms of qualification for the European Cup for next season is massive. And they've had some serious performances this season as well. So I think that I would give them a real chance of turning over Ulster.
For the running rugby purist, I think this will be a fabulous game in Kingspan to kick off the URC playoffs on Friday week. I think definitely from an Ulster rugby perspective. Let's put into perspective, when we spoke come November, December, there was a bit of a hiccup from an Ulster rugby season perspective, particularly that collapse against Leinster Rugby at the Aviva. Again, there was signs here that the season could go away from them. But all credit to Ulster Rugby, securing that second spot in the URC, securing home field advantage up until the final potentially. I think it's a great achievement for Dan McFarlane and the squad of players. But again, they're going to fit. This is a tricky assignment for Ulster Rugby. Again, they're going to have to play this very cleverly in terms of their pack and their back line cohesion. They can't go too expansive here against a Connacht Rugby team that will just relish the open play and open field here. And I would be with you here as well. I mean, I think the back trees are going to be absolutely sensational on the night, if it's anyway a dry track day. But again, Connacht have a good recent record against Ulster Rugby and certainly won't fear Ulster. I think this is one of the games of the round here, Liam, coming up in the playoffs.
Yeah, well, yeah, it certainly is probably, and in terms of, I think away wins are possible for a number of teams in the quarterfinals. I really do, and that's one of them. And again, we probably with Munster as well have a really glorious chance of an away win as well. So yeah, it's something to look forward to for sure.
A great season for Ulster Rugby. I mean, we can wrap up from an Irish provincial perspective. Leinster travelling to Loftus Versfeld to face the Bulls. Now, we'd said last week here, Liam, on the podcast that we felt this would be a high-scoring affair, but little did we think that 62 points would be conceded by that Leinster rugby selection. And let's call it a selection. I mean, all the frontline players were back in Dublin preparing for the Toulouse Champions Cup game. But I think for those players on duty, and particularly Sean O'Brien, the head coach, I think this was a reality check in terms of when you lose the gain line battle, bad things happen. And so it proved with the Bulls, who were pretty rampant and produced probably their best performance of the season.
Yeah, and again, as we said, the Bulls are a step up from the Lions as well. So a bit of perspective there. They have a number of outstanding Springboks in Kin Moody, Kirtley Orense as well, and then serious power up front in Norky and Juan Grobbelaar. So yeah, or Johan Grobbelaar. So yeah, but I think we still were expecting it to be, as you said, high scoring, but maybe something like 40-20 or something like that. But yeah, I mean, for Leinster to basically to get one try in the game and for them to absolutely get over 60 is unexpected, I guess. But the thing is, it's a harsh lesson, but it was men against boys. So I suppose that's what we can say about that game.
Yeah, and I know, Liam, you'd alluded to it last week on the podcast. It's so difficult to produce back-to-back performances, particularly in the South African tour, that it does add another element of complexity to teams that have to travel to South Africa. And I think Leinster have seen that in full effect. I mean, they lost the physicality battle, particularly in the gain line, and particularly with the Bulls so rampant out wide as well. If I threw you a few stats out here, Liam, from a possession perspective, Bulls enjoyed 70% possession. The tackle count, Bulls made 67, Leinster 200, and Bulls made 5 times as many metres as Leinster during those 80 minutes. I mean, 62-7, I think it's an accurate reflection, I think, of how the game went, but I think it's a good learning curve for an awful lot of players that we highlighted last week from a Leinster Rugby perspective that have massive potential, but this is a big learning curve in terms of being in the Loftus Versfeld, the altitude, and really getting your preparation, your physicality right from minute one. And again, probably food for thought for those players and Sean O'Brien as they made their way back to Dublin this week.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, Prendergast, from the incredible high of last week, it really does show in terms of I would have, if you don't have a platform, you simply aren't going to be in the game. And it was as simple as that. Now, did Leinster, I mean, they did lose, Rhys Ruddock last week, so he wasn't available for the game this week. And the massive Georgian Abeledze, he went off injured. So, as it was, they were quite threadbare. So with those that sort of guys gone, what's going to have much of a platform up front, really?
Yeah, but still, marvellous regular season performance from Leinster Rugby. From a squad dynamic perspective here, Liam, it's been a magnificent season. Their first and only loss in the regular season coming in the Loftus Versfeld. They were up and away very early on in this URC regular season campaign. They are the form team, they are the template, they are the barometer for other URC teams to compare themselves against. And again, seeded number 1, facing the Sharks in the playoffs. I suppose we can run down through the results. Stormers defeating Benetton 38-22, not enough to secure the second place in the URC because Ulster did the business against Edinburgh 28-14 in Kingspan. Lions against Zebre was a very entertaining affair. Lions 50, Zebre 35. Zebre unfortunately going 0 for 18 on the season. Bulls we've discussed 62-7. Dragons, that was your prediction from last week, Liam, came good against a Scarlets team that rested a number of first team players, 31-14. Sharks and Munster we've already discussed 22-all. And then in the Welsh Shield decider, I know I went for the Ospreys. I think you went for Cardiff, Liam. I think you came up trumps again, 38-21 Cardiff. And then Glasgow and Connacht we've reviewed 29-27. Any other results there that really kind of highlight there for you in the regular season finale?
The Cardiff Ospreys, in the sense of outside of the actual game itself, like the result for either one was going to guarantee the Welsh Shield, but we have to put in perspective the Cardiff finishing 10th place, and they essentially get the 7th spot in the URC log for qualifying for Europe. And I think this is the last season apparently that the shields, that the shield winners are going to be guaranteed a spot in Europe for the following season. So for the Welsh teams next season, it really is going to have to be top 6, top 7 finish if they want to get a European spot.
And I suppose the lead up to this game between the Ospreys and Cardiff was Dai Young being suspended by Cardiff Rugby before the game. More drama, if no drama was required for Welsh Rugby for that. But I mean, all credit for Cardiff Rugby coming back from that Connacht Rugby loss in round 17 to produce a performance in the Principality Stadium to secure the Welsh Shield and I suppose save your season, really, to be perfectly honest. I suppose the playoff picture is Leinster entertaining the Sharks, Ulster hosting Connacht. You have the Stormers versus the Bulls in the South African tie, and Glasgow versus Munster. You've kind of eyed up a few away wins here. I mean, Leinster Sharks looks a very tasty fixture. If you consider Leinster doing battle against Toulouse this weekend in Champions Cup, could it be a tad little bit vulnerable against the Sharks pack that has an awful lot of physicality and maybe Leinster rotating squad here? Did it look a little bit vulnerable in a last 8 URC playoff fixture, Liam?
Yeah, you'd imagine that the Sharks will front up physically because that's certainly something they offer. But again, I think the Sharks, they're playing a real team in Leinster, and I think without Etzebeth and without Khaleesi and potentially Bosch, their first choice 10, I can't actually see them offering too much, to be honest about it. I think those 3 losses are just too much for the Sharks. As you said, Leinster will kind of mix and match. I'm pretty certain for that game in terms of their squad depth. They'll go into it, but I still fancy Leinster to have a fairly comfortable win actually in that game.
Yeah, I think it'll be a nice tester for Leinster straight after the Toulouse fixture, particularly in the front 5 exchanges. We know how good the Sharks are from, let's say, an attacking set piece perspective, particularly their scrummaging, their attacking maul. They will test Leinster all day long in terms of that, and maybe they try to keep it tight. But as you say, all the aces kind of indicate that all those players that you've named here for Sharks that are unavailable, this looks probably a tough ask here for Sharks. And given the head coaching role, given the turbulence here in the Sharks squad, failure to qualify for Champions Cup next season, real hammer blow. I think there's financial implications here, Liam. I can see quite a few of the marquee Sharks pack going elsewhere come next season. So I think from a Sharks perspective, maybe the competitiveness, maybe it's a squad in transition next season.
It could very well be, but certainly, I mean, in terms of the league, they should have just done a lot better in terms of position. You know, even if you compare them to teams above them, the likes of, quite frankly, Connacht, Bulls, and Munster. I mean, you really could have said that the Sharks should have finished above all those sides, and didn't. So yeah, it's their head coach role is basically has to be, I'd have to say, almost probably gone at this stage for that performances.
Particularly when I think back in the last year, particularly that Cardiff home performance when they were absolutely blanked. They were annihilated by a Cardiff rugby team, missing quite a few regulars as well. I think that really set the tone. Or I think from my perspective here, the league table doesn't lie at the end of the season. I think the Sharks fundamentally, I think we talked about this off air here, Liam, the cohesion between the pack and the backs has never been there. It has been a very much a work in progress all year. And again, this result against Munster really caught up with the Sharks at the wrong time because they had no time to recover here to maybe get a top 7 spot. But I think it's a huge blow for the Sharks, considering the financial backing, potentially the investment that's been going in. There's going to be a turnaround in coaching staff, obviously, here as well in the Sharks. So it'll be interesting just to see how they will react to travelling up to Dublin in 2 weeks' time. I suppose the Ulster-Connacht game we've kind of talked about, the Glasgow-Munster. Stormers versus Bulls as well. I mean, considering the Bulls put 62 points past a Leinster rugby selection, do you give them any chance down in the Cape to play the Stormers?
Yeah, actually, you'd have to give them a chance. It's going to be probably a typical derby game, tight enough certainly in terms of the first half, and it's just a question of whether, for me, the Stormers can pull away in the second half. And one of that thing for me is whether Dion Fourie is playing. That's absolutely massive. I also think that the Stormers have the overall game with like Evan Roos back again. I think that also adds to the Stormers game. I think the key player will be Damien Willemse. I think wherever he roams or wherever he plays, I think he's just going to create absolute havoc for the Bulls. And I just think that the Bulls have also a fearsome front row as well, and I think that's going to earn them penalties actually at scrum time. So I think they will pull away in the second 20 minutes, I think they'll two scores. I think like 14, 15 points. I think in the end.
I'd go with you there, Liam. I think the overall balance of the two teams here, I think Bulls will have their moments, particularly in the first half. But I think going into that third quarter, fourth quarter, depth chart, bench being cleared, I think Stormers here, they do have that skill set. They do have that kind of genuine class to really break a game open. And I think Williams, is a key cog on that. Kitsoff as well has had a very prominent last few weeks as well for Stormers in that front row. I think it'll be a superb scrummaging kind of battle there as well. But I would go with the Stormers as well, purely on home field advantage. I suppose we talked about the Ulster-Connacht game here. You're given a good chance here for Connacht here from what we talked about a few minutes ago here, Liam.
Yeah, I mean, look, you've got in terms of in the back line, when you've got the likes of Blade and Porch and, Hansen and Aki. And then, like, up front, my God, like, I mean, you have Finlay Bealham, who is such a destructive scrummager, and you have an excellent, the Murrays in the second row, and then the likes of Prendergast, Boyle, and Jared Butler. I mean, yeah, you'd have to give them a chance, to tick all the boxes. Again, it's just a question of, Can Ulster, I think that Tom O'Toole might possibly be out for this, so I think that makes another difference in terms of I think Ulster could find a right handful in terms of scrummaging time, and I think that Connacht could get quite a bit of penalties off Ulster. And again, I think it's a kind of game where if Ulster are able to get their driving maul into effect, that will make a key difference in that game, I think.
The breakdown battle is going to be fascinating watch here. When you consider the likes of the Nick Timothy's here, you're considering the likes of the Butlers, I would say, as well. Conor Oliver's had a superb season for Connacht Rugby as well. I think whoever tries to control the ruck area here has a big advantage here. And as you said, that Ulster attacking maul from 5-10 metres out could be ominous for Connacht. But as you said, there was a few noticeable absentees from Connacht Rugby heading into that Glasgow Warriors game. The key will be to get Bundy back, Kieran Marmion back, other people within the squad. Mark Hansen, I think, it was unavailable as well. So again, I think that's probably the tie of the round for me. Really, I think this could be fireworks because these two backlines have the potency to really cut the other open here with their attacking play. So again, I would probably give a slight edge here to Ulster, just a slight edge, but I think I would not be surprised here if Connacht Rugby won this in an absolute classic, like a 40-35 classic here, to be perfectly fair.
Realistically, probably Ulster will just sneak it. But look, I'm giving them probably 60-40, in terms of Ulster to win, I think. Yeah.
And I suppose the Glasgow-Munster game as well, I think there's grounds for optimism here for Munster Rugby, but I suppose Munster have a few demons to bury here in Scotstoun. One, that performance from Glasgow Warriors at Thomond Park, but two, let's be brutally frank about it here, the business end of the season, that URC playoff quarter-final last year against Ulster Rugby probably is irking a few of the players here and the management to right a few wrongs here. So I feel Munster will come into this game looking to prove a point here. And given that Glasgow Warriors have a very tough fixture away to Scarlets in the Challenge Cup, I think we've probably given Munster a good chance here of maybe securing an upset win here, even though Glasgow Warriors have been unbeaten in Scotstoun and the URC this season.
Yeah, it would be nice to add Glasgow Warriors to some of our famous away wins. And it's well doable. And again, I'm not sure in terms of the Challenge Cup whether realistically at this stage, if I was Glasgow, I'd be resting guys in the Challenge Cup, and kind of focusing on the URC. I think that Munster selection, off the bench is just off the charts compared to what Glasgow probably would be able to bring. And I think, again, selection in terms of Healy off the bench brings something else, and I can see him breaking Scottish hearts actually in that game.
I'd agree with you too. I think if there is an away performance win, I think this could be the one really right at the end. Liam, I think this is all poised to be an absolute titanic battle. As I said, two franchises that don't really like each other historically. And I think Munster are very battle hardened after that South African trip. They have a week now to recover, to get back in to Limerick and prepare fully for this URC quarter-final. And again, I think there's optimism within this Munster Rugby camp. I think the pressure may be off them a little bit in terms of securing the 5th place in URC. An awful lot of the future has been settled, the certainty from a Munster Rugby perspective. And yeah, I would probably go for an away win. I think Glasgow could be earmarking a Challenge Cup here, really, given the fixture. They did kind of provide an awful lot of front line players against Connacht, but again, they're so close to silverware, European silverware, Liam. I think it would be remiss of Glasgow Warriors not to really fully dedicate their squad to the Scarlets at the weekend. So there might be attrition there. There might be injuries. So I think a fresher Munster could really spring a surprise there. And I suppose we can get to the European Cup fixtures here. Champions Cup semi-finals in the Aviva Stadium on Saturday. We have Leinster Rugby versus Toulouse. La Rochelle entertaining Exeter Chiefs in Bordeaux. I suppose, Liam, from a Leinster Rugby Toulouse fixture perspective, it doesn't get much bigger than that.
Yeah, last year it was a very handy win, I suppose, for Leinster. But this is a different beast in terms of this Toulouse team. And it still isn't a given, because I think, to me, the three best teams in Europe, in no order, are Leinster and Toulouse and La Rochelle. Any one of those three can win it. So it's not a given that Leinster, even with home advantage, can actually win the European Cup this season. But I think, again, I look at the Leinster, the sheer strength in their squad off the bench, is just incredible. I think that Toulouse, if you were to name a World XV at the moment, probably would feature the teams of Leinster, La Rochelle and Toulouse, with maybe a few Crusaders, and that's the kind of quality you're looking at here. You've got Ramos, who's going to kick from everywhere. You've got obviously the best player in the world, as well in terms of Dupont, but then you also have some other good players in the world in terms of Caelan Doris and Josh van der Fleer and Gary Ringrose and players of that ilk. I think that it's going to be an absolutely ferocious game. It's going to be in the melting pot right to the end, I think. But I think that Leinster will find a way, basically, like all great teams, to win the game. I think that Leinster probably have a better back row than Toulouse, just about. I think it's going to shade it there, and that's going to determine the game as well, I think. They'll dictate the pace of the game, and I think that, quite frankly, will play it at a quicker pace than Toulouse. I also think that Leinster won't allow the game to become broken field play, because that just is going to be try time for Toulouse. I think Leinster will really keep a controlled game. That's how you beat Toulouse.
Yeah, I'd agree with you, particularly on the controlled game plan, because Sharks maybe fell into the trap of being a little bit too expansive against Toulouse, particularly in that second and third quarter, in that quarter-final win for Toulouse. So I do think that, look, Leinster have really no excuses here, Liam, have they? I mean, since the Leicester Tigers quarter-final, again, squad players, fringe players have gone to South Africa and URC, fulfill fixtures. The frontline players and management have really honed in all their energies into this particular semi-final. So really, preparation can't have gone any better, really, from a Leinster rugby perspective. You compare that with Toulouse, where they did rest one or two players for the Stade Francais away trip. They lost 19-10, but significantly, they did pick up a few injuries. I think Jaminet would have been an outside bet to feature in the 23-man squad. It looks as if he has a serious ankle injury. Also, Josh Brennan as well went off with a concussion. So I think from that perspective here, I think the Aces are kind of still with Leinster. It's too close to call from my perspective, though, Liam. I think last season was probably an aberration in terms of Toulouse. That Munster quarter-final fixture took so much out of them that Leinster really did kind of expose an awful lot of fatigue in the Toulouse ranks. But I don't see that here. And, you have the likes of Dupont and Ntamak here that are clicking into gear at the right time as a partnership. I think Leinster have to be on high alert here in terms of, as you say, the game plan. If it does break out a little bit open, Amalia, guys like that could really prosper in the Aviva Stadium on Saturday.
Yeah, and again, I think compared to last year, the key thing was that Ntamak really wasn't on form last year. If you remember, those calls for Jalibert for France, and he's just playing at a different level now. So again, that's makes them more dangerous as well. I think that Toulouse, they will kick an awful lot again, because that's just how Dupont plays as well. They will kick an awful lot. So in the area battle, I think hopefully that Leinster are going to be prepared for that as well.
Exactly. So I suppose from a Leinster perspective, the injuries, James Lowe has been ruled out already to lead up to the game. More of a positive prognosis for the likes of Caelan Doris, Josh van der Fleer, and also Ryan Baird. But I suppose early on in the week, as we're recording this podcast, so I think it'll be pivotal here, though, Liam. Though you mentioned about the back row unit for a Josh van der Fleer, Caelan Doris, and also maybe Ryan Baird as well to really contribute here for Leinster on Saturday to be successful.
Yeah, exactly. It'll certainly be interesting whether they bring Ryan Baird back. You'd imagine probably Baird could be in the back row alongside Van der Fleer and Doris, with Conan then to come in off the bench for real impact. And I think that's the kind of going to be the make of the back row. Ruddock is probably going to be out anyway as well. So that's a very tasty and powerful back row, and I think that is the difference in the end.
So I suppose predictions, Liam, I'm kind of hearing you're hedging bets for the home team here. Well, neutral home team. But I suppose Leinster to do the job here, but narrowly compared to last year.
Narrowly, probably a kind of try or unconverted try. So I go with 5-point win for Leinster.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you there. I think Toulouse would bring a better battle, a better performance than they did last year. But I think they will come up short. They will present scoring opportunities for Leinster, who, if they are accurate with ball in hand, I think will cause Toulouse an awful lot of problems defensively, particularly in back three perspective. So yeah, I would go 7-point win here for Leinster to advance to the final, where they will face either La Rochelle or Exeter Chiefs. I suppose, Liam, looking ahead to that game on Sunday, what are the key kind of matchups that you're looking forward to during that fixture?
Well, I think it'll be interesting in terms of the two front rows. They're always excellent scrummaging in terms of Exeter Chiefs, and then they're going up against Antonio. So that's going to be an absolutely terrific game. Sam Simmons, is always an exciting player to watch, and Jack Nowell, of course, he's come back into good form. He's been injured for a lot of season, so I'm delighted to see him back. But I think that all the aces are held by La Rochelle, because I think they have, again, some of the best players in the world in terms of right through the spine of the team, from Antonio to Skelton to Aldridge to Botia to Dante. So I think in every sphere, I think, and in France, I think they've done well. I think Exeter probably, to be honest, had a kind of a good draw in terms of the European Cup to get this far. La Rochelle, I fancy to get to the final again for a second year in a row, to have the motivation to retain their crown.
I think going for Exeter Chiefs I was very impressed with them against the Stormers. I mean, the Montpellier result was a bit close for comfort, to be perfectly fair, in Sandy Park, but the Exeter Stormers game, I thought the way how Exeter started the game with an awful lot of physicality, aggression, their breakdown work really did expose Stormers all ends up. And I think the game in that fixture was over at half time. I suppose, can Exeter Chiefs really disrupt like Gloucester did? I'm just thinking of Gloucester on that last 16, where they really disrupted La Rochelle in terms of the ruck area and breakdown, and really did create an awful lot of good opportunities themselves. And maybe on another day we're very unlucky not to advance. But going along with you, I mean, you're looking across the teams here. I think Exeter, this is going to be a pretty arduous task. I mean, if the weather is set fair in France, again, La Rochelle are just going to keep that intensity level going for the full 80 minutes. And I think from an Exeter Chiefs perspective here, Hastoy as well, from La Rochelle perspective, has been a huge bonus for them, particularly if you thought there was a vulnerability with La Rochelle last season, maybe the kicking off the tee certainly can't be like that this year. I mean, he's been absolutely deadly accurate, but putting points over. So, I mean, Ultan Delan has been pretty prominent here for La Rochelle as well. It seems to be getting more cameos here as the business end of the season progresses. But yeah, I'm probably thinking 10-14 point win here for La Rochelle, given a statement of intent before heading to Dublin and, as you say, looking to repeat on the Champions Cup. And look, if they can get a 10-14 point win, they're going to send an ominous sign to whoever is in the other side of the draw that La Rochelle are still hungry and still determined to retain their crown here, Liam.
Yeah, definitely. I would say that La Rochelle, they really have a glorious chance of becoming a truly great European club, back-to-back winners in Europe. And under the steward coaching of Ronan O'Gara, I think they have every opportunity of doing that.
Yeah, pretty elite club though as well, Liam, if they could do that. But I suppose first things first, get business done on Sunday. Exeter will provide physicality, they will provide cohesion, but I think La Rochelle's physicality and overall skill set, I think, prevail here. I suppose the Challenge Cup as well, reaching the semi-final stage here. We've two games, one in the Parky Scarlets entertaining Glasgow Warriors. In the south of France, Toulon facing Benetton Rugby. I suppose, Liam, from your perspective, who are the winners coming out of those two games this weekend?
It depends the way that Glasgow approach this. In terms of, I suppose, their team selection too, what they're prioritising competitions. But I also think that Llanelli have done extremely well over the second half of the season as well in terms of Europe and in the URC. And the last day, actually, was it 2 weeks ago? It was 12-9. Glasgow at home to Llanelli, and Llanelli really brought their game. And I think Llanelli at home, I just fancy it's going to be one of those legendary days that, you know, all great clubs like Munster and Leicester and Llanelli have had in the past. And I just think it's going to be a special occasion. Like a lot of Welsh teams, they're going to have a lot of guys leaving and a lot of retirements, and it's kind of like almost the last defiant hurrah, I think, in some respects for this club. And I just think that they're going to get the win, because what it really means to them. It kind of defies logic, but when you look at the league placings, but I think it'll be a match with I think a lot of tries in it. Funny enough, I think at the end it'll be that Llanelli will outscore Glasgow in tries, something like 5-3 or something, or 5-4.
Yeah, if you asked me last week, Liam, I would have kind of said Glasgow Warriors very comfortably, but I suppose the Scarlets have been prepping for this game for the last 2 weeks at least. I mean, they did rest enough out their first team players against the Dragons to finish off the URC regular season, so you can see where the priorities are. As you say, I think you've raised a great point, Liam, in terms of the Glasgow Warriors. What is the prioritisation this year? Is it to go all the way in URC, or is it to really secure European Challenge Cup silverware? To that effect, I mean, they've been very dominant, Glasgow, in terms of their last 2 games. They've scored 104 points. They put 73 points, obviously, past the Dragons at home. But again, we saw vulnerabilities in their performance against Connacht Rugby. And I mean, from a Scarlet's perspective, they've really impressed. They really impressed me against Munster Rugby, particularly down in Musgrave Park. That second half performance really was free-flowing, very accurate, exceptional offloading. And from my perspective here, Liam, look at the Scarlet's run to this point. They beat Brive, and then they beat Clermont-Auvergne, an absolute classic, in the last 8 at home. So, I mean, they're battle-hardened in this competition. I think Glasgow Warriors, as you say, have the eye off the ball in any way. I think Scarlets could actually shock Glasgow, and I'm probably going with a Scarlets home win here. I think the home field advantage here for Scarlets is going to be huge. I think 3 to 5 points here, Liam. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm going to go by, you know, as I said, they're going to outscore them tries wise. I think it'll be I'll give me 8-point win for Scarlets.
So it'll be interesting to see, fascinating watch. I think Glasgow will load up the first teamers here, particularly, but Scarlets, again, this is save our season territory here, Liam. Didn't realise they're within 160 minutes of winning a European Challenge Cup, which gets them guaranteed entry into the Champions Cup next season. So I think the rewards are huge here for Scarlets, and I think that might be the edge here that they require. I suppose culminating then in South of France, Toulon against Benetton, an affiliation to Benetton Rugby all season in terms of their running rugby, their progression this season. They're going to face a big acid test here in the shape of Toulon, who have been mightily impressive in the competition so far. But do we give Benetton a good chance to maybe secure a road trip win in Toulon?
It's kind of one of the things where I was before this. I was kind of almost tipping Benetton to do an away win, but as the week has come by, I suppose realistically, I think Toulon at home, you know, at the French team in the south of France, are going to be very formidable opponents, and they also have that carrot of Europe and winning a competition, which they haven't done probably since they won the European Cup. And I think also that Benetton, they are a bit loose in defence. They do rack up big scores, but they also concede quite hefty amounts too. And I think that Toulon should have enough for Benetton, unfortunately, in the south of France. So I would have to look at maybe Toulon by 5 or 6 points.
Like for me, for Benetton to win, there's a few points I've written down here. I think the front 5 has to be completely on the money on Sunday. No ifs or buts. They have to be absolutely perfect. Otherwise, I think this game could go away from them a bit quickly here. Its front 5 do impress. They do have the game here, particularly, let's say, Umanga, likes of Minicello, guys like that can, you know, create opportunities. But again, I'm looking at that Toulon bench here. I mean, likes of West, bigger at 10, Saran at 9, you have Olivion, you have a meaty front five pack here as well that will secure front foot ball. I thought they were mightily impressive against Lyon in this quarter-final. I know we can probably quip that, the French teams, particularly in quarter-final stage Challenge Cup, isn't really a priority for them compared to their domestic league. But again, I thought they were mightily impressive. And I mean, home support here, I think Toulon, probably 7 to 10 points. But I think the hope here, Liam, is that Benetton are competitive and produce a performance. And I think it'd be great for tournament organisers if an Italian team could win here to get into the big dance, as in the European Cup finals that Friday night, particularly in Dublin, to the prelude to Champions Cup. To have an Italian team in the final would be absolutely brilliant for tournament organisers and for the Italian game, I think, as a whole here, Liam.
It certainly would, and I mean, I don't put it past them. They have pretty much 6 of the Italian pack. They have the Argentinian loose head prop, and then they have the Italian centre. So they certainly have some quality there, and they certainly seem like a long-term project in terms of getting Fekitoa for next season as well and improving the squad. But Toulon, in terms of their league, I think they're 5th or 6th place in the league, so they are actually having quite a good season. They are, very formidable at home. That's why I think they're looking at on the 2 fronts this season of doing well in Europe as well, and as well as qualifying high up in the league.
Yeah, they're currently 5th in domestic league, so a much stronger performance from Toulon than in previous seasons. Yeah, I think it's a tough task here for Benetton, but again, hope springs eternal here, Liam. Fingers crossed for Benetton, but I think if you're a betting man, I think you would go for the home team here. So it looks as if we have probably a Leinster La Rochelle Champions Cup final. It looks like it's a Scarlets Toulon final, which would be quite novel as well. I suppose Liam would leave it there. It's been a lengthy one, but plenty to cover. I suppose in our next episode we'll review the Champions Cup semi-finals and also look at the URC quarterfinals, the playoffs fast approaching. We'll have a more in-depth review there. I suppose, Liam, enjoy the long weekend and we'll talk next week.
Yeah, okay, Mark. Thanks so much. Enjoy yourself. Good luck.
Thank you for listening to this podcast episode. If you liked what you heard in this podcast, why not subscribe to the Hawkeye Sidekick podcast on either Amazon, Spotify, YouTube or Twitter platforms. You can also follow me at Hawkeye Sidekick on Facebook and Twitter for the latest sporting opinions, articles and reports.